Hello, dear friends. Welcome to PEN Prithvi, our fortnightly platform in which we have readings by poets and writers from India and beyond, working in English and other languages. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Maaz bin Bilal. Hello, Maaz. Admins, can you please bring him on screen as a panelist? Uh, Maaz is a very special poet. He's based in Delhi, and but he's traveled a fair bit around. Hello, Maaz.
Now you'll be able to hear me. Hi. How are you? Thank
Hi.
you.
Welcome to PEN Prithvi. It's a real pleasure to have you reading with us this evening.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
And just to get the ball rolling, I'll just read out your bio.
Right.
Maaz bin Bilal is a poet, translator, and cultural critic. His first book of poems, Ghazalnama, Poems from Delhi, Belfast, and Urdu, was published in 2019. He has also translated Fikr Taunsvi's diary, The Sixth River, a journal from the Partition of India, 2019. Maaz was Charles Wallace India Trust Fellow in Writing and Translation at University of Wales in 2018. He holds a PhD from Queen's University, Belfast, on the politics of friendship in E.M. Forster's work, and teaches literary studies at Jindal Global University. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I should tell everybody who's listening in that I just finished reading Maaz's wonderful collection Ghazalnama, and I strongly recommend that you pick up your copy. It's got some truly delightful work, especially but not exclusively in the realm of the English ghazal, of which I hope we will be hearing some tonight. In addition, Maaz's work as a translator is also very remarkable, and he tells me that he's also going to be reading out from his longer translation of Ghalib's poem, I believe, on Lucknow.
Banaras.
On Banaras.
Yes.
So he'll be so we have quite a treat in store for us this evening. So Maaz, just let me just orient the session a little bit, just to ask you how this lockdown has been treating you.
Oh, the lockdown. Yes. So the lockdown has its stages as well, right? So we're now in the state of unlockdown, right? I've forgotten the number that we are at. Maybe it's 5 or something. So it's treated me also differently over the phases. The very first phase, which was the most stringent, had me doing things that I wouldn't do otherwise. A lot of us middle class people do a lot of things that we wouldn't do otherwise. We didn't have a domestic labor, so I was cooking and enjoying that. I was gardening much more, and I used to cook earlier during my PhD days very regularly. This kind of came back. In the early phase, in that phase itself, somehow I was also quite productive creatively. Our university had abundant classes in that time. And I did write a number of poems, and I started writing creative prose fiction for the first time. So that was something new as well. And some of this writing was also done newly in the sense that much of it was handwritten. I used to write poetry by hand all the time, but I'd stopped writing prose by hand many years ago, as many of us have now with computers and mobile phones. But during the lockdown, I also started using fountain pens in a big way. So that is also a change that happened during the lockdown. So now I'm back to teaching classes during this unlockdown kind of phase. And in fact, it's almost 2 full semesters now that we've been online, or at least getting there. And I'm sure it is getting to students as well, but it is getting to teachers too. It is the impersonal sort of digital way of teaching now that we all are forced to undertake. We make do, as we make do on these platforms also, but they have their perks, such as allowing us across cities to engage like this as well. So that's how the lockdown has been for me. How's it been for you?
Absolutely. Sorry?
How's it been for you?
The same, actually. I was remarking to somebody the other day that being a writer is a bit like being under lockdown, except that it is voluntarily imposed.
Yes.
And so I was, apart from the occasional grocery run, I was quite happy being confined indoors and doing my journalistic writing and doing my book reviews and doing my personal writing projects as well.
Right.
So the lockdown period has been quite productive for me as well.
Mhm.
And I finished half a manuscript of poems and
Wonderful.
finished putting together a photo book that I
Right.
hope will come out sometime soon.
Look forward to
But
it.
thank you, very very kind of you to say that. And and yes, I've also taken to writing with fountain pens during the lockdown. It's strange how these synchronicities take place, and I don't know if this is the case for you as well, but I find that writing with a fountain pen changes the way I approach writing. It
Mhm.
makes it more deliberate, it makes it more tactile, more physical,
Definitely.
less of an abstract chess like exercise and more of a exercise involving the body as well as the mind.
Yes, definitely. And I hadn't written creative prose before this. So fiction is something new that I've taken up, and I don't think I can do it even now if I were typing. The hand seems to flow on its own in a way. And as you were saying, it's very bodily, it's tactile. So it's sort of the writing happens with a natural bodily movement almost. Whereas if I were to type it, I don't think I could even do it. I do type it up later. I mean, there are multiple drafts there after that, which I edit, and all of that is still happening on the computer. But yes, you're perfectly spot on when you say that the fountain pen has a different aspect, almost a nature to it.
And you mentioned that you were doing some work in creative fiction.
Mhm.
Care to let a bit of the cat out of the bag and tell us what the project is or when it will be out or
Oh, no, it's nowhere near completion. I don't know when it will be out. It's a collection that I'm thinking of short stories uh, centered around family life in Old Delhi. So, to an extent, they're autobiographical, but only to an extent. And also, Old Delhi is a kind of a microcosmic culture that is often portrayed in cinema and elsewhere, and often exoticized. Quite yeah, I mean, let's just state, yeah, let's that it's exoticized, not very well, of course. So it's not portrayed very well. So hopefully I will be not getting into the same kind of gimmickry, but actually trying to investigate or at least represent character motivations and how people of Old Delhi lead their lives, what their worldviews are. So each short story, as it's planned, is centered around one character, and they're interrelated short stories, and characters overlap. And each one then sort of is written either from the perspective of or primarily focuses on one character. And let's see what form it takes eventually. I don't know if it'll, by the end, if it'll become just one long novel, or I don't know what it'll be. So let's see. I've written a couple or so far. So let's see where this goes.
wonderful, wonderful. Looking forward to it whenever it comes out in its own sweet time.
Yes.
And but today, of course, we are speaking poetry, and we are going to be uh, listening to some of your work. So I really would love to get the evening started because I can't wait to hear what you have to say. How would you like to begin? Would you like to begin with a poem?
Yeah, sure. Perhaps I wasn't planning to, but then now when you ask me about the lockdown, I do have a lockdown poem. If you like, I could read that first and then maybe get
Absolutely.
later. Yeah. So this one is written both in response to the lockdown, but also to uh, the violence that just preceded it or occurred during it also, and the migrations that were going on. And the violence, of course, was kind of in response to protests that had been going on. So the poem responds to that also. The poem is called "Who Did It." It's also in the form of a ghazal. This one's already been published also by the political journal, EPW, Bombay based in fact. And it's in the form of a ghazal, and it's called "Who Did It." After I've tweaked the cry a little, but there's this bird lapwing, titehri, which is called in Hindi, which in English is supposed to have the sound of "Did he do it?" Actually, that's
Yes.
how. So I tweaked that a little into "Who did it." and the Tehri, it does make a sound which has this a lot of D's or keys in it. So I tweak that a little. It's called Who Did It. So I'll begin, if you'd allow me.
Please.
Yeah. The call of the lapwing sounds at night. Who did it? On which detection must we alight? Who did it? The whole town was witness to the crime nonetheless. The hakim forces the victim right. Who did it? And hakim can be judge, can be ruler. So the hakim forces the victim right. Who did it? A plague is afoot, sifting through humanity. Who spread it? Where did it come? Isn't it right? Who did it? Where we go from here may scream to the skies of the bravery of all those who fight. Who did it? Nature's self-correction, the sins of the fathers. Did a God will this to set aright? Who did it? I am drunk on wine and they are on power. Who'll adjudge who is wrong, who is right? Who did it? The rich live in isolation in large bungalows. Abdul, who built that house, must fight. Who did it? Deserts of loneliness and ghettos and camps. Who put them there and set them alight? Who did it? Birds still chirp, humor persists. There's laughter, O Maaz. Do not write poetry from pain to spite. Who did it?
Wow.
Shukriya. Thank you.
Very, 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 very political, but also very, very aesthetically pleasing. It's political poetry, but it's not sloganeering, and that's the only kind of political poetry that I guess works on the page, in the mind of the reader. And of course, the form of the ghazal, with its absolute beauty of rhyme and refrain. You really bring it out really well.
Thank you. That's very kind. That's what I try for. I mean, I also agree that political poetry shouldn't come down to being sloganeering. So you've put it very well. Yes.
That's right. Maaz, I really want to ask you this question. And in many ways, it is a very trite question because it may or may not have an answer. But can you tell us about your engagement with the ghazal is more than a passing fancy.
Yeah.
But can you tell us about your engagement with the ghazal in English? Who you consider your forebears, whether you consider the ghazal in English to have a tradition at all, and if so, who are your forebears in this tradition?
Thanks, Suhit. Actually, it will have to be Agha Shahid Ali. I mean, that for people who read poetry and Indian poetry, that would be apparent. And I guess you know that already as well. So in English, it will have to be Agha Shahid Ali. In fact, I don't think any other poet in English has consistently written good ghazals. There's Robert Bly in America who wrote a whole lot of ghazals, and he wrote ghazal tercets also. So ghazal which instead of couplets were written 3-line stanzas. Then I like some of the attempts of the anti-ghazal writers in America, like Adrienne Rich. Actually, I like some of her stuff, but in terms of form, that's not a ghazal. She retains the germinal idea that it should be in 2 lines, and there should be an exposition, which is then responded to in interesting ways in the second line, and each couplet can be a standalone poem. So she retains that idea very well, and so I admire her for that. But what she's written are not formal ghazals. And then there are others who just retain the bare idea of form, but then move away completely from what is the universe of the ghazal. In a way, and that's slightly more difficult to explain in brief, actually. There's a whole universe of the ghazal that there are these top characters and concepts. And it is radical poetry from the beginning. It is love poetry, but a radical love poetry, which is questioning the modes of society, of two lovers being together despite political opposition often, drinking, which was a taboo in Muslim societies, almost made was hallowed almost, and so there is, and even the people like the hakim, the ruler, or the munsif, the judge, or the Maulvi, they're all derided often. So religion, or the orthodox religion, is often derided as well. And there is an engagement with the secular as well as the divine, and the divine is engaged with outside of the orthodox, again in heterodox ways. So it is radical poetry to begin with, and there's an entire universe of it. So some who stick to the form have completely moved away from the universe, which I don't think is also quite okay into, I mean, not in the truest spirit. So in my latter poetry, I try more strongly to move towards the universe of the poetry, as I'm calling it, not as much in the early section, though I think almost subconsciously some of it was there. Uh, so Agha Shahid Ali, of course, and then from Urdu there are other phobias. Ghalib is very important, whom I'm still translating, even Faiz to an extent, Mir more recently, so from Urdu phobias as well. Um, and I took to the ghazal because in English, when I did get interested in reading and writing poetry, I felt as if the voice was not. I was trying to find my own voice, and the voice of other English poetry was not doing justice to my internal music, which was coming from a family home which was kind of steeped in Urdu poetry, and my father would be playing, and ghazals are sung, of course. Most listeners might know that. So we were listening to ghazals a lot, and that was kind of the internal melody. So I wanted to write in English, keeping that, and I was writing in English primarily because of the limitations again of many of us middle class children. While growing up, we go to English speaking schools and can only write in English. So in a way, it was a balancing act. Yeah.
Yes, and I also feel, I also got the impression. Please correct me if I'm being presumptuous here. That the ghazal, with its roots and writing a ghazal in English, in a sense to create a sort of fusion or a sort of best of both worlds scenario,
Mm-hmm.
to create a rich hybridity.
In,
Is it also a way of belonging or a way of staking out a imaginary sort of a ground on which to stand on?
Indeed, perfectly. You put it very well. So that hybridity is what I was seeking, because I didn't want to write in the ways that Western writers, of course, write in English, or even necessarily how, say, other Indian writers were writing about their trajectories. I think every poet is always trying to look for their original voice and to make their original contribution. And when I discovered Aka Shahid Ali, seemed like the adequate vehicle for my own thoughts and emotions as well. And the collection itself, and as my writing of ghazals and other poetry grew, and the collection came together. The subtitle is poems from Delhi, Belfast, and Urdu. So, so there are two cities, and even Urdu as a language is attempted to be portrayed as a space of belonging. Um, so, uh, so the whole collection, in a way, is about belonging, I'd like to think, and how this belonging cannot be easily compartmentalized, and it is to be found between languages, between forms, between cities, and between poetic traditions.
Right, right, right. So let's keep again the ball rolling with
Yeah.
perhaps another poem that you might want to read out.
So I was thinking I'll read the poem that forms the preface to the collection, because we've been talking about the ghazal, so this will explain the form further to the reader as well, because it's a ghazal about ghazal in a sense, and therefore it has an epigraph from John Hollander's poem. He's again a US poet, American poet, who wrote a poem called A Ghazal on Ghazal. So the epigraph is from there. Two frail arms of your delicate form I pursue, inaccessible, vibrant, sublime at the end. So this is John Hollander. And my poem is called The Ghazal in Your Hands. The ghazal is conversation, mehendi in your hands, the beauty of a ghazal, coquetry in your hands. In each couplet, a new thought unravels in paradox. The heart lies in between the symmetry of your hands.
Wow.
What more may be said in rhymes and refrains? Entire cultures, not desolate towns, no folly in your hands. Many idols are loved and beauty appraised. Beloved boys, girls, and wine. God lives in the paisley in your hands. Two moments you know, your birth and death. What weapon better than twin prosody in your hands? In chaos, order free verse, not a tight form, they say, but you'd capture life here, philosophy in your hands. Mir and Ghalib gained many a yar, but it was Faiz who befriended his Raqib, the enemy in your hands. A form thus perfected, will you better Shahid Maaz? Let poetry come, become clay, like putty in your hands. So a lot
Wow.
of the questions that you were asking are also, in fact, answered self-reflexively here. The
Yes,
influences,
indeed.
other things.
And I like how you didn't go with straight rhyme in this ghazal. You use slant rhyme and assonance and all that, which also makes it very very nice to hear. Which also creates a sort of variation on a pattern.
Yes.
Which
Thank you.
brings me to my next question. Before I'll keep it a short question before we launch into the next poem, which is, can you give us a little bit of insight into your ghazal writing process? It is a highly patterned, very very well, I wouldn't use the word rigid, but certainly very, very well established,
Mhm.
straight form, couplets, rhymes.
Yes.
Uh,
Refrains.
the first verse and the last verse have certain unique characteristics.
Yes. Mhm.
So, can you give us a little bit into your insight into your ghazal writing process? I'm
So the
aware it's not fully conscious in any poet, but
Yes.
still.
So the first couplet is, of course, the one that sets the meter, the rhythm, that is, and the rhyme and the refrain. And in that, both the lines will have the rhyme and the refrain. And subsequently, every second couplet has the rhyme and the refrain, but the meter ideally should be consistent. And the last couplet will have the poet's pen name. Right. So that's the form. I do try to, in fact, now, although I have written one more ghazal that I just read out during the lockdown, but I try, in fact, to move away from the form now. In a way, it both allowed me initially, particularly, to find a voice and to express what I wanted to in it. But now I also find it binding and limiting on me at times, and therefore, I don't think there would be another Ghazalnama forthcoming. So it will
I
be
see.
another collection of poetry which will have its own unique characteristics, hopefully. But I don't typically set out to write a ghazal, and I didn't even initially. Like I'm saying, the form just appealed to me. It appealed to me for cultural, historical, and musical reasons. And and because it is a rigid form, it bound me in my early poetry writing days. When I think without it, perhaps I would have been floundering and just writing drivel almost. And so it's good to be writing in form. I feel, particularly in your early days, in any form that appeals to one. And but also the basic structure where each couplet can portray a different thought or idea that appeals to me also. And the fact that then they are connected, the whole poem is connected largely by a mood, or an underlying idea. That's, I think, an interesting concept as well, which doesn't exist in, I think, any other form in a way almost. And definitely not in the West, definitely not in English. So in that, it's quite unique and interesting. So that draws me to it as well. As for a ghazal or for other poems, it's often one mood or one particular thought or image that sparks it off. And then once I start writing, then the poem takes on its own life, and that's how it goes about.
Wonderful. And is the next poem you're going to read out also a ghazal, or it's a departure from the
I thought I'll read
from the ghazal mold?
maybe one or two more ghazals quickly. How much more time do we have in all? Maybe
Don't
not.
worry about the time. We have time.
Okay. So maybe I thought I'll read one or two more ghazals quickly, and then move to other stuff. Uh,
Certainly.
so this is again this one. So the earlier ghazal was more recent, but this is one of the very early ghazals that I wrote. It's called Restless. The promise forever there to be restless, and nebulous stars destiny restless. Where do I locate her God in this world? Heisenberg's electrons mutiny restless. Shall I fall dead or grieve endlessly? The wild bees gather their honey restless. Metaphors of water, wavy bodies, fickle fluid flowing in a flurry restless. You come not and I keep biding my time. The peacock's wings are furled, surly, restless. Together in raging storms, powerless. Delhi too, romantic, rainy, restless. What of my love, our passion, your indifference? The earth, oceans, very heavens break free, restless. Find meaning in God, her person in words. Nestlings call for food from a tree, restless. Add on to the surplus worlds. Who gives a damn, Mars, that you be restless?
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah. So having the pen name in the last couplet also allows you interesting images and emotions. Like you can be laconic, you can be self-ironical, won't be self-mocking, which I think is a healthy state of being. Particularly in our own, poets can get too self-involved also. So that's another reason the ghazal can be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I read one short ghazal? One more.
Of course, of course. Please go ahead.
The L word. Such epistemic murk around the L word aren't all trying to work around the L word. No Shireen for me, no Hir, I'm no Qais. Qais is the Arabic name of Majnun. No Shireen for me, no Hir, I'm no Qais. Other desires too lurk around the L word. Jahangir's city, Shalimar, Anarkali, left my heart there to bark around the L word.
Wow.
Tigresses may take all in Sundarbans. A male, what use my quirks around the L word. In Arabic, come seek refuge in Maaz. What use being a Turk around the L word?
Very, very playful, no? It does dance around the L word. It does work with the L word. Yes. Lovely, lovely work.
So perhaps something that's not a ghazal now.
Yeah.
It's called. So this is from Belfast while I was staying there, living there for my PhD. It's called Biryani in Belfast. I started cooking in a big way there, and I'm a big foodie. So, and I didn't cook at all until the time that I went there. But I love my mother's Mughlai cooking particularly. So the poem is called Biryani in Belfast, and again, perhaps I'll introduce this idea that maybe not everyone would know that in Northern Ireland there has been the history of the Troubles, the internal conflict, almost civil war, and the two sides there too have different colors that they identify with, and one is orange, which is of the loyalists to the crown, the British crown, and the Republicans often have green attached to them. Then biryani in Belfast. Making biryani in Belfast is no trouble. You get the ready-made Pakistani spice mix from the Indian store. Follow the recipe, add some saffron and chilies and cardamom, and voila, there it is. The green enmeshed in the orange rice, even as some grains fail to catch color and remain simply white. It all smells delicious. The brown meat is nicely softened, but also stands out.
Wow.
Thank you. Uh, After this, I was thinking that perhaps so Ghazalnama also has a section of translations, and these are translations all from Urdu. I thought I'd read a couple of translations of Urdu ghazals before I move on to my own other poetry, and then finally to the Persian translations from.
Lovely.
So one translation of a Ghalib ghazal. This is quite a famous one. ये न थी हमारी किस्मत के विसाले यार होता अगर और
क्या
जीते
बात है?
होते यही इंतजार होता. It wasn't our destiny to be with our lover. Had we lived anymore, the wait would have been longer. I live by your promise, knowing it to be false. Wouldn't I have died of joy if I were a believer? Through your caprice, we learned that the pledge was weak. With such ease would it break if it were any stronger? They should ask my heart how your half-drawn arrows could pierce it through and where they get their power. What friendship is this that friends become counselors? This should have been a healer, a sympathizer. Blood would pour unstoppably from the veins of marble. What you believe to be grief may be scorching fire. So Ghalib as he can be both very biting and also quite political, though he's not given the credit for. If this torment's heartbreaking, where'd we go hiding? If it weren't the pain of love, it'd be of our career.
Oh.
To whom do I complain of the sad night's refrain? Death wouldn't be too bad, if only once it were. This dishonor on death, why didn't we drown instead? There would have been no tomb, there would have been no buyer. Who can see him? He is one, the monad. Were there any duality, our four eyes would pair. These
Wow.
matters of mystic thought, these renderings of yours, Ghalib, we'd call you a saint, were you not a drinker.
तुझे हम वली समझते जो ना बाद अखबार. बहुत खूब, बहुत
So
खूब.
his wit is ever evident, of course.
Yes.
I won't read more Ghalib because I will be reading a chunk from Chiragh-e-Der, which is
Yes.
Temple on the long poem on Banaras in Farsi later. So I'll be reading my translation of that. But I'll read one more translation. This is of the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar.
Wow.
And he was also a pretty good poet, actually. Although some of his poems that are attributed to him are perhaps not actually by him, but many are. And Ghalib was finally his main teacher, although most of the life of both, it was Zauq who was the poet laureate of the court. So anyway, so this poem in Urdu, I'll just read a couplet maybe. या मुझे अफसर शाहाना बनाया होता या मेरा ताज गदाया न बनाया होता. So it is about royalty lamenting the state of its loss, almost as if Bahadur Shah was, of course, living in a state of great Mughal decline. Although he wouldn't have known the actual end was so near. But so the ghazal seems to reflect on that. So I thought it might be interesting to read out this one. I wish you had made me the master of royals, or made my crown the bowl for arms and betrayals. You should have made me mad, crazy only for you. Why did you make me wise, capable of denials? You made me poor, fit only for sifting through dust. And I wish the dust of her feet were my trials.
Wow.
If you made me intoxicated with love, why did you make the measure of life small vials? A wretched heart, torn 100 times over, lives. To be the shoulder to rest her head is my desire. If I were not worthy to be with the Sufis, could have been good for the company of drunks, defiant. If you wish to burn me by parting from the poorer, should have made me the lamp of the tavern's foyer. The fire of beauty was not unveiled in the garden, or the bulbul too would have been made a moth on fire.
Wow.
The incessant world is a vile place, O Zafar. Its cities should have been desolate and dire.
Wow.
This is probably a king who's quite bitter from where he's writing from. Anyway, so I'll maybe stop with the ghazals for a while and read just two very short haiku. I don't write a lot of haiku. I know you do, in fact, but more than me, certainly. So, but there's a couple of haiku in the collection that I'd like to read out. The first is, she sends me an X every night on chat. Like a share almost with repetition. She sends me an X every night on chat. On its edge, I'll cut a lip.
Oh.
And then there's another one of longing. On murmurations of starlings, murmurations are the large groups of starlings that make these wonderful shapes in the sky. On murmurations of starlings, send me your love. The email's old school. Okay. So actually, that was a rather brief break from the ghazal. Maybe I will read just one final ghazal from the collection before I move on to other more recent poetry, which is not from the collection then. This one's called Caravans of Love. This was after Karwan-e Muhabbat. which was again a movement in response to lynchings, actually, the beef lynchings. And I don't think there's anything I need to quite explain here. Yeah, so I'll just read it. And I intentionally leave the meter in the last couplet, which actually becomes a tercet then. So to breathe of your breath, not to die in love, rebellion must be all, defy in love. Sameness is the bane of this life. To difference I go, to test and try in love. What are my limits? The test of your patience. What are my limits? The test of your patience. I can wage holy wars. Why cry in love? Ethics of the other, all pleasures for myself. Ethics of the other, all pleasures for myself, accept, commit, care, comply in love, to see this world with not two but four eyes. When revelations all your sky in love, the falls of the moon, the heat of the stars, forget desire, dream to fly in love, lead caravans of love, touch people's misery. Lead caravans of love, touch people's misery, love's bonds, love's politics. Love, 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 love. Go on, forget your I in love.
Wow.
So I thought in place of a makta, I'd rather forget the I here in love.
And I absolutely loved that image of revelation being the sky.
Thank you.
Absolutely loved it.
Okay, so if I may move on, I would like to read a poem that's slightly longer in 6 segments, 6 parts. It's a poem that I wrote during my fellowship in creative writing and translation in Aberystwyth, Wales. And it was a coastal town, and the beaches there were not quite sandy, they were very pebble strewn. So the poem is called Pebbles. First, pebbles are never lonely, always in touch with one another. Like grains of sand, only bigger. But even when redeemed to a particle, they never fuse. Each one distinct, each lonely. Second, a heart-shaped pebble is not easily found and sells for 15 pounds. Framed by glass to be stared at by all and sundry, even when hung in your house by the sea. Third, cobbled streets lead nowhere, made of large-sized pebbles, a matter of semantics, 64 to 256 mm. They hurt the feet, despite the metal-shod jackboot that seeks to crush the stone beneath. Cephos were cast into 2 urns in ancient Greece. He whose urn had more pebbles always came out on top. But what of the pebbles that are forever cast in minority? Fifth, land runs short for us, the wretched of the earth. Pebbles smashed out by the seas. A child comes along, throws a few back in, but out again into the margins, us without a polity. Sixth, pebbles. They're varied. I pick some up, hurl them back in, just to let the ocean know you might be all powerful, but we are not asleep.
Wow.
And
very metaphorical, very, very metaphorical poem.
Thanks. So I just want to read a last poem before I move on to the new Ghalib translations.
Lovely.
Could I share my screen? This is a concrete poem for which I'd
Yes.
like the audience to be able to see it.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. If I just press share screen, I think that should do it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think now, can you see the mosque?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, wonderful. So as you can see, it's shaped like a mosque. The poem was written, in fact, this was published in EPW as well, and the note at the bottom tells you that the poem was written in response when the North Gatehouse of the 800-year-old Keria Mosque in Xinjiang province was demolished
Yes.
by the Chinese state, and also the Notre Dame had burned recently in Paris, of course. Um, the mosque is sacred to Islam. Once built on legally valid ground, it has a claim to stand till eternity. This is the belief of Muslims that once a mosque, always a mosque. So even when mosques are raised by China or the Hindu Parishad, the mosque stays alive in the minds and imaginations and beliefs of Muslims unless the site is proven unlawful. But the destruction at the hands of different forces should be a matter of pain and prayer for the loss of long and deep histories, just as the Buddhas of Bamia and the Church of Notre Dame deserve to be mourned, and vigils must be kept for peace. Thank
Lovely. Lovely.
you. Okay, how do I now stop screen share? Okay. Yeah, now I think it should be all right.
Yes.
Uh, shall I move on now to the translations from the Persian poetry?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So I take translation almost as a part of my poetic practice
Uh,
itself, poetic translation particularly. Sorry, were you saying something?
no, no, no. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So, and in fact, I think it hones your own craft as a poet, but also allows a different kind of invention when you have uh, given words from another language and you try to recreate their poetry in English. Uh, so I stumbled upon Ghalib's Chirage there, which is a long poem in Persian about Banaras. And it appealed to me greatly because, first, simply because I'm interested in Ghalib in general and his poetry. And in a way, his Urdu poetry, I don't read Persian perfectly well. So I've not read all of his Persian poetry, but those who have seem to think that his Urdu poetry is superior to his Persian poetry. But this particular poem had relevance for different reasons for me. Because firstly, simply because it is a poem about Banaras, uh, and Banaras is in flux today. It is a long historical city that has existed for very long, and but today, a lot of it has been demolished for development, and there is a site there. And the previous poem that I read out was also about called the mosque, and most recently, and I read that poem today particularly because just a couple of days back, or even yesterday, I forget, uh, the Mathura High Court, the Mathura Court has accepted an appeal
Yeah.
to have the Mathura Eidgah uh, reconsidered, possibly demolished, uh, because it's claimed that it's the site of Lord Krishna's birth. And similarly, there's a mosque in Banaras also that is very controversial, and it's surrounded often and has been surrounded for the last almost 100 years with controversy. So, so, so to see what Ghalib is saying about Banaras in the 19th century, being a Shia Muslim himself, um, and then how does he approach Banaras, which is largely primarily a city of Hindu pilgrimage, was a very interesting kind of insight into even today's Banaras. And how he views the Ganga, what the Ganga is like, what the city of Banaras is like. As he describes it, it's largely a garden city, which I visited Banaras recently. It's not quite, not anymore. And so it's a garden city at the time that he visits it. It's a city that he falls in love with, that he wants to stay on for very long. He's en route to Calcutta, where he's trying to fight a case with the British. He's trying to petition for a legacy that he's owed by the British, but that is gotten contested, and he's only receiving half the amount that he's supposed to. So he's going to appeal to the British in Calcutta, and en route he stopped in in Banaras, and he was supposed to stay there for a couple of days only or so and move on, but he ended up staying there for a couple of months. He liked the city so much, and he's written in letters to friends that he thought of even converting to Hinduism there and just settling there. Uh, that's how much he liked the city. And So the poem is a long poem. It's in the form of the Masnavi, which is a long poem written in couplets. Which the couplet may have an internal rhyme, but not all of it needs to follow the same rhyme. Ghalib's couplets here follow both rhyme and refrain. In fact, uh, the poem can be divided into different sequences. I'm going to read a few of these. I'm going to read the very first, which is almost like a lament for having left Delhi. And this is written in a longer tradition in Urdu and Persian poetry of poetry of lament for the city. It's called Shehr Ashob. It can also mean the city in turmoil, or the city lament, or the city's boisterous cries. But in Urdu poetry, it came to mean largely because of 18th and 19th century historical destructions of Delhi, its numerous destructions particularly. It came to mean the lament of the city for Delhi particularly. So his early part is also lamenting his leaving of Delhi. So I will read 10 or 11 couplets from here first in my translation.
Sure.
Today my breath conjoins the notes of the sur of Israfil, and my silence tends to become the plains of Hashr. Today all secrets will be unveiled. The Sur of Israfil, Sur is the trumpet of doom that Israfil, who in biblical tradition is called Raphael, Israfil, the archangel, will blow this trumpet from the holy rock in Jerusalem before Armageddon, leading to the day of resurrection of souls. And the plains of Hashr are where all the souls will be judged on their good and evil acts, as all veils will be unveiled. So I'll read this couplet again because there's a number of references. Today my breath conjoins the notes of the sur of Israfil, and my silence tends to become the plains of Hashr. Today all secrets will be unveiled. I am the vein of stone, my writing sparks. I write in fire. I am a fistful of dirt. I write dust storms. My heart gets excited with the noise of complaints. Who knows what storms this drop contains? My conscience speaks through the words dripping from my lips. It is a lament that turns my breath bloody with fibers torn from my liver. My tail is more scattered than my beloved's long hair. Each particle of my body threatens to become a tongue. I complain to my friends as if the katan cloth is washed in moonlight only to be ribbed. The katan cloth was supposed to be this very delicate cloth which could be torn simply by being exposed to the moonlight.
Oh,
I burn in the sound of my own music. The embers of my voice have scorched my heart into a kebab. On the harp of lament, my each breath forms a chord. Like a flute, my bones are filled with fire. The way the sea spews pearls, I too have left Delhi, as if iron expels its jewels, thinking them cheap dust. From the moment destiny threw me out of Delhi, I was thrown into tumultuous storms, expelled from memory. There's no one who cares for me in that city. I know no longer a country of my own. And this sort of goes on for a while. I'll stop with this section here. So initially he talks about his own writing and tries to sort of uh, uh, emphasize the qualities of his own writing and strength, which is a common trope with Ghalib. Ghalib, of course, means dominant. And then he begins lamenting about having to leave Delhi, and then talks about his friends that he's left there, which I will not read now. And then soon enough, he claims that Banaras is the city that can not just compensate, but even supersede Delhi in his imagination. So in a way, this poem was interesting and important for me to translate, and there has been no English complete translation so far of the poem, uh, because uh, because Ghalib is made out to be this major poet of Delhi, but not too many people seem to realize that he was actually also in love with Banaras, which is not a city that often comes up when we think of Ghalib. So I'll read this section where Ghalib is praising Banaras to the skies.
Wonderful, and it's a beautiful point. It's a beautiful place as we reach the 10-minute mark of our session. There are 10 minutes left.
So should
So,
I?
so it's a beautiful place to sort of take us segue into the conclusion.
Right. So I'll maybe just read this section and not the final one that I was thinking, and then if there are any questions, we could take them.
Yes.
I'm in love with this land of flowers. Spring settles here in every corner of the heart. This
Wow.
city has pride of place in the world. Even Delhi comes to circle around it. Looking upon the vista of Banaras, the eye claims sylvan views. It occasions the bliss and love of spring. Poetry attains its pride of place in heaven when it sings paeans in praise of Kashi. May God keep Banaras from the evil eye. It is a blessed heaven, paradise under sky. Someone once compared the beauty of Banaras to China, and since that day its brow is wrinkled with the bend of the Ganga.
Wow.
Delighted with its modes of the ways of being of Banaras, with each breath, Delhi sends its blessings for Kashi.
Wow.
Were the eyes of Delhi's dreams transfixed at Banaras? Is that why its mouth drools now with the waters of its canal? To call it the envy of Delhi would be discourtesy, but it should be no wonder that there is jealousy. When they open their lips, the believers in reincarnation, they sing praises of Kashi, they have their reasons.
Wow.
All captive souls that quit their prisons from this garden never again find union with their bodies. This garden is the wealth of those who find death here to gain eternal life. And actually, I'll skip quite a few and just read one couplet from the middle of the poem, roughly. The poem, by the way, is in 108 couplets, which is the Hindu cosmological number as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the one I want to read out finally, and maybe we could end my reading here, is the couplet number 47, and it goes so. The supreme place of worship for the conch blowers, surely Banaras is the Kaaba of Hindustan.
Oh, wow. Kya baat hai. It's and again, congratulations on doing this very, very important translation project,
Thank you.
which for most of us uninitiated or people who don't know that much about Ghalib, but what we get to hear in the popular media, you're really bringing to us a new side of Ghalib, which is extremely rich, which really points out to the confluential nature of the man.
Right.
And so it's absolutely fantastic, and I wish you well for this project. Any idea when? Can you give us any idea when it will be out, or?
So sometime next year, hopefully, I will be handing over the manuscript probably by the end of the year. And I'm done translating the poem. I'm working on the introduction. I'm also writing a critical introduction to it. So I'm working on that, and hopefully it should be out next year.
Wonderful, wonderful. Looking forward to it, and I can't wait to read it. Shall we have a few questions? I believe there are a few questions in our chat box.
I'm looking at them now. They seem more like comments. I'm not sure. I understand Mr. Arif's.
Yeah, there is one question here. Not a question. Vinita says, not a question, really a request. Could you recite one of your favorite ghazals in Urdu, please?
In Urdu, so I don't write in Urdu.
Okay.
I don't have. I'm very bad at remembering poetry, so I don't have. Uh, I can't recite from memory. I can recite one of the originals that I've translated here. I could recite one of the originals of that. Maybe a short one because I think we're at the end of time also.
Yes.
So maybe a very short ghazal. I've translated a couple of short ghazals by Ghalib here. So I could maybe read out one of those. Uh, or I like this Kafi by Bulle Shah also. Maybe let me read that. Though it's for Holi and we are nowhere close to Holi, but maybe this one, this Kafi, it's almost in partly in Punjabi also. It's not quite proper Urdu, but that's how language was. There was no word Urdu at that time in use at all.
Yeah.
होरी खेलूंगी कह बिस्मिल्लाह नाम नबी की रत्न चढ़ी बूंद पड़ी अल्लाह अल्लाह रंग रंगीली ओही खिलावे जिसे सिखी हो फनाफी अल्लाह अलस्तु बिरब्बिकुम प्रीतम बोले सब सखियां ने घूंघट खोले कालू बला यूं ही कर बोले ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह होरी खेलूंगी कह बिस्मिल्लाह.
Wow.
So, so there are verses from the Quran here. Alastu bi rabbikum. Maybe for this I do need to read the translation. I'll quickly read that and explain.
Yes,
it.
yes, yes. Yes.
I will play holy beginning in the name of the Lord, saying Bismillah. Cast like a gem in the name of the Prophet, each drop falls with the beat of Allah, Allah. Only he may play with these colorful dyes who has learned to lose himself in Allah. Am I not your Lord? Asked the lover. And that's the verse from the Quran. Am I not your Lord? And all the maids lifted their veils.
Achha.
So this is really an allusion probably to Krishna, right?
Right.
Everyone said yes. There is only one God. I will play holy beginning in the name of the Lord, saying Bismillah.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Fantastic.
Thank you.
So, Maaz, we're almost out of time, but thank you so much for joining us. You have a very, very busy schedule. You teach, you write, you translate, and to take time out and to give us an hour of your time and to it was an absolute delight to listen to you today.
No, Shweta, pleasure is truly mine. I read some wonderful comments here also. Thank you, Malvika, for a wonderful comment. I'm not sure if I can see everything that you're seeing because the question you posed, I couldn't see that. But
Okay.
Thank you to everyone who's here. Thank you for joining me. And I'm glad that Suhit, you enjoyed what you heard. I hope the others did too. Thank you.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. And hopefully, when all of this crisis is behind us in some form or the other, hopefully we can have a live in-person mushaira with Maaz bin Bilal.
Nothing like it. But for now, this was excellent. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Maaz. And so I wish everybody a goodbye. Stay safe out there. Remember that we are a fortnightly platform. PEN Prithvi has readings by poets and writers working in English and other languages and from India and beyond. Please follow us on Instagram at PEN Prithvi, on Twitter at PEN Prithvi. Please, we also have a YouTube channel called PEN Prithvi Webcast, where this session and other sessions, previous sessions, you will get to see them because we are recording these sessions. So even if you didn't manage to catch this session, don't worry, you can always go back to YouTube and relish it at leisure. So I'll bring proceedings to a close now. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending, and thank you, Maaz, for giving us your time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.